Hi, I'm Dan and welcome to Airbrush Garage. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. All right, I'm really excited today to share this with you guys. My daughter and my grandson, Jack, my newest and only grandson, Jack, came to visit me for Christmas and brought me this. So Santa Claus brought me a TG Talon Gravity Feed Airbrush by Paasche. There's a lot of features packed inside this box that we're going to take a look at today. I'm going to break it down. We're going to review it. We're going to test it out. Let you guys know what I think about it. I will tell you, Paasche goes back with me a really long way because Paasche was the first airbrush that I learned on. It was a Paasche VL siphon-fed airbrush. But Paasche is a great company. It's known for their quality products. And honestly, the price point is just really unbelievable for what the quality is of a Paasche and what you get with these kits. So if that's something you think you're interested in, please stick around. Consider subscribing. Hit that bell so you get future notifications. A couple comments, good or bad, really helps out with the YouTube algorithm, helps this channel grow. A thumbs up would be great. Don't forget to check out all those Amazon affiliate links for the products I use in this video and all my other videos down below. And with that, let's get started. All right, so we're going to take a look what's inside this box, but before we do, I just want to let you know the price point on this particular brush is anywhere from, you can get it anywhere on sale from $80 to about $120. It also depends on the package that you get. You can get this where it's just the airbrush and not some of the other accessories that come in here. But this one here, they got on sale. They got a really good deal on it. It was about $80. It comes with a nice box. This is also one of the finest airbrushes that Paasche makes. And again, the price point's around probably between $100 and $120. And you really can't beat that for what comes here in this box. So Paasche gives you, and there's the VL, by the way. That's the one I started with. Gives you a nice guide here of the airbrush, parts list, Paasche's limited warranty. So it gives you a warranty on the brush itself. So again, I just think that Paasche is just loaded with quality for what you get. So we open up the box. The first thing I see is the airbrush. Airbrush looks great. I really like the that gold anodized handle. It's got the cap. And it's got a really cool engraved eagle, hence its name, the Talon, or an eagle's talon. So you got an eagle right here on the side of the brush. It's got the cutaway for easy access to pull the needle back and forth to clear some jams. It's got your stop or your trigger stop if that's something you like. I think the really cool part that we're going to be going over here with this particular brush is that it's got different heads that you can put on here. And the different heads that you can put on here are a 0.25, a 0.38, and a 0.66. And then there's really even an added feature that I've never seen really come with another airbrush before is it's going to have a fan cap. So we're going to try that out as well. So it's got your needle cap right here, your protective needle cap. Again, I usually keep that on when I'm not spraying. When I'm spraying, I usually take that off. But the airbrush looks really good. And again, just even the feel of it, the weight of it, the look of it, you can see that it's a quality airbrush. Gives you a 6-foot hose with it. The only thing I don't like about Paasche, and I remember that from early on, is for some reason their hoses, they give you the 1/8 inch on one side, the 1/4 on the other. I usually like 1/8 and 1/8. Not a big deal. But you would have to go out and get an adapter to go from 1/4 to 1/8. Where this does work well is if you're going right to the compressor, your compressor fittings a lot of times on your standard hardware compressors that a lot of people use, not the airbrush compressors, it is a 1/4 inch fitting. So this goes right there. So that becomes handy as well if that's your setup. But either way, it's not a big deal. The other things it gives you is it gives you the spanner wrench. It gives you an Allen wrench. I'm not quite sure what that's for yet. We'll look into that. Gives you a little hanger if you want to put a hanger on your workbench to hang your airbrush. I have plenty of holders, so I won't be needing that. But again, it gives you your spanner wrench to get your nozzles off. And again, an Allen wrench, which I'm not quite sure what that's for yet. All right, so off camera, I laid this stuff out and looked in the literature just to make sure I understood what everything was. And right here you have a T1 to T2 is already in the airbrush, the needle nozzle combinations I'm talking about here, and the T3. So the T1, as per the literature, is a 0.25 needle nozzle combination. The T2, which is in the airbrush right now, is a 0.38, and the T3 is a 0.66. And of course, you have the fan cap. So I was wondering what this adapter was, and it dawned on me that Paasche has a very small male end on their airbrushes that fits their hoses. I don't particularly care for these particular hoses because that's not the hoses. I have, a lot of hoses that I can utilize that I can't just hook right up to this airbrush. So what they did was they gave us an adapter with this little O-ring. The O-ring would go in here. This screws onto the airbrush itself. Now that becomes the same end as what's on my Iwatas. So now I can just go and hook up any hose I want. I can hook up my water traps. So as you can see, the smaller end just really kind of is a hassle if you're set up with the bigger end for like your Iwatas. So now when you use your water trap like this, or that's the type of setup I like, you can't go and just plug this hose in. So I'm probably not going to utilize this hose. If it's your first airbrush and you want to get set up, that's not a problem. You plug this right into your airbrush or screw this right onto your Talon. You take your 1/4-inch end. If you don't have an airbrush compressor with the 1/8 inch end and you got the 1/4-inch end on your regular shop compressor, that'll go right on. You're up and running in no time. But for now, I'm going to use the adapter so I can utilize everything here. I got my water trap with my quick disconnect right there. All right, so before we go any further, what I'm going to do is we're going to break the brush down. We're going to take a look at its components before we load it up with paint. All right, so every time I get a new airbrush, the first thing you want to do, whether it's your first airbrush or your 15th airbrush, I always recommend that you take it apart so you know how it comes apart for the event when you're going to have to take it apart to clean it. So I really like to do this right off the bat to check the airbrush out and get familiar with all the parts. All right, so this spanner wrench has two sides to it. It has a square end and the wrench end. The square end is going to go over your nozzle, your needle nozzle. All right, so this is the needle nut. Now, one thing I don't really particularly care about what I'm seeing is I like to pull the needle through the front of the brush, and there is some grooves on the back of the needles, and I'll explain that in a second, but that tends or seems to be getting caught, so I'm not going to force it through that way. So when I remove the needle, or when you remove the needle from this brush, you're going to have to remove it through the back. That's not the end of the world. If you guys ever seen any of my other videos, I like to pull the needle through the front so I'm not dragging paint back through. But so for as tight as the nylon O-ring that's in there is, I don't really think I'm going to be dragging any paint back through, so I feel pretty comfortable with that. That's the other thing I do want to mention is that this brush can do solvent or water-based paints. It doesn't really matter because it has the Teflon O-ring inside. So when you look at these needles, when you first get this pack, and I'm sure it explains it in here somewhere, but you know how people are with reading things very thoroughly like myself, you're thinking, well, okay, how do I tell the difference between these needles if they're just sitting here? Okay, well, remember I said there is a TA1, a TA2, and a TA3. So if you sit them side by side here and you look at them, it's really difficult to tell which needle is what. But here's how Paasche does it. So the TA2, and I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick up on this, has 2 grooves at the end of the needle. The TA1 has 1 groove, and the TA3 has 3 grooves. So that is how they mark their needles, so you know which one you're using. 20 years ago, I didn't pick up on that. I didn't have any literature or YouTube to turn to tell me that. So honestly, I didn't know what I was doing or what needle I was using. But that's how you tell their needles apart. So as far as the airbrush goes, just very standard. It's, got your normal trigger on here. The trigger itself, I like their trigger. You don't have that little tab sticking down where you got to get it into a hole. Basically, you just pull your spring back. There's a little dimple in the end of this that's going to go right into a little needle that's sticking up on your air valve. So that's a really easy trigger to get in and out. It's not beveled in the front. It's kind of your older style trigger that's like on your older Iwatas. It's got the knurls though. For those of you who like to reach your finger pretty much over the trigger, you may find that this cup may get in your way. It's kind of a big cup, but overall, I like what I'm seeing. It just really exudes, quality when you're holding it. I really do like it. So we're going to put it back together. We're going to load it up with some paint, and we're going to test it out. All right, so I got some paint loaded up in the airbrush, but before I do that, I just wanted to hit a few points on, again, what Paasche sends you with this. So if you're a first timer, it gives you some airbrush lessons in here for beginners. So it gives you all the basic exercises. There's some troubleshooting in here. That's really good. Like, well, the paint's bubbling in my cup. What do I do? So that's really cool. I do want to mention that this brush has a working pressure of up to 55 psi. We're going to be spraying around 27 psi as what is my normal and usual. So that's where I'm going to test this out at. The other thing I'd like to always do is anything with a trigger stop, you don't know where this is right out of the box. So what I do is I pull my trigger all the way back. I usually do this before I put paint in here. Now I'm not pressing down in the air because I don't want paint to come out. But I back off on the trigger stop and then I turn it just till I feel resistance so I know that I'm getting a full pull on my trigger. All right, and just one more thing before we move on to the spray test is that I do want to go back to the markings with the T1, T2, and T3. So the needle, the nozzle, and the needle nozzle itself all has the little markings on it. If there's one stripe on it or one indentation, it's for the T1, 2, T2, 3, T3. So everything is marked with those so you can't get confused. So I think that's a really cool feature that they thought of. So we're going to be starting off with the T1, which is the 0.25. And it was recommended by a viewer. He said, Dan, he said, well, everybody does these reviews where you're just painting lines and stuff like that. Why can't anybody just do a painting? Well, it takes long enough to do a review, and basically, I would like to do that in the future, but this airbrush has so many different features. I want to try all 3, or actually 4 features because of the fan cap for you guys to see what this brush can do. And, we really do need to see how it's going to spray the lines and dots. So here we go. We'll just do a little gradient shade here to see how it's atomizing the paint. Nice and soft, looks good. Again, this is the smallest tip size. So this would be the tip that you're using for your finest detail. All right, not bad. I'm going to test the responsiveness of the trigger. If it's laying paint down exactly at my start point that I want and end point that I'm looking for. You can see the fine detail I can get with that. Not bad. Looks good. Try a couple dagger strokes. Now I'm really curious to see if we put the fan cap on, what kind of spray we get with that. Especially with the very fine needle. So this is what I'm really curious to see, the difference in the width of patterns. So with any fan cap, you have to realize that these two little wings that stick out here, you have holes that are going to be shooting air to or towards your paint coming out straight. So what it's going to do, it's going to hit it and push it into a fan or a straight line. So depending on where you have your cap, okay, you got to adjust your cap. So if I'm straight up and down, it's going to give me a horizontal fan. Okay, and if I am horizontal, it's going to push it into a vertical. So let's start with that. So in order to do that, you have to hold where you want your fan, and then you want to tighten it down. Okay, so now the first pass I did here, I was at 27 psi, and it came very speckly. Now I'm going to up the pressure a little bit. So it looks to me that we're getting about a 1.25 inch pass on that. So again, this would be really good for doing like backgrounds, flooding in your paint. Now, I'm going to expect this to work a lot better as we move up in needle sizes. I probably wouldn't use the fan cap with the smaller needle. I just wanted to test it out for you guys to see what would happen because I never used a fan cap at that small of a needle before. I only ever used one on a 0.5. So let me change the paper out here. We're going to change needles and we'll be right back. All right, so that is something really cool that I just discovered that I didn't know. And so my fear of always pulling a needle out the back of an airbrush. Well, Paasche made this really cool design, and now I see why they designed it. Remember I said that the shaft is all one diameter, and then they machined it down at a certain point for the point, or to get to the tip. Well, when I just pull this out, this part stayed clear because it's smaller or a different diameter than the outside diameter of this. When I pulled it out, I got no paint drag coming up on my needle itself, therefore kept everything clean and coming out the back of the airbrush. That is something you don't get with the Iwatas or other airbrushes that I've seen. That is really, really cool. All right, so for the sake of time for this review, so we don't go too long, the 0.38, I'm not going to demonstrate that. That's going to perform. I can probably get the same level of detail with that as I could the 0.25. So, but what I really wanted to make sure I touched upon is that this does from the finest level of detail with that 0.25. And again, I don't really recommend using the fan cap. The fan cap's probably, hopefully going to work a lot better. I really think with this 0.66 that we got going on right here. And the other thing I want to mention is the changeover between changing it out from the one needle nozzle combination to the other literally took less than 5 minutes. So I found it very easy to do. And now that we got the 0.66 loaded up here, again, this really isn't for fine detail, but we'll see how fine of a detail we can get with it. But I'm really interested with this for the fan cap itself. But let's check this out. I'm going to be spraying this. Being at the 0.5, I'm going to bump the pressure up to about 35 psi on this. Oh, wow. And it's going to throw a lot of paint at 0.6. I mean, the width lines you can get with this right here, trigger all the way back, about 3 inches away. You're looking at about approximately 1 inch right there. As you can see, you can get a lot of coverage really quick. So let's try some lines and some dots with it. Not that I would really use this for lines and dots. Let's just see what it can do. And you can see with your trigger control itself, I mean, you can get some really even pretty fine detail with that itself. It's just a lot easier to get in fine detail with a smaller tip. So really cool. So let's put the fan on it and see what that does. I really do believe that this is what the fan was made for, the 0.6. Again, I was just curious what it was going to do with the smaller tip sizes. And after testing it out, I don't recommend it. But let's see what this can do. All right, let's see what we get out of this fan cap. So we are going to be getting I'm about 4 inches away on that. And the pattern we're getting is about 2.5 inches. Yeah, so we're about 2.5 inches about where you should be. That's a little far away. It says you get up to a 3-inch pattern. I'm at about 2.5. With your overspray, you're about 3, but I'm looking at the actual pattern itself. But you're going to get a more atomized spray with this. That spray is really nice. Sprays like a mini spray gun. And I'm out of paint. That was really cool. I really liked it. Again, I only recommend this with the 0.66. I'm at about 35. You want to go to 40 psi when you're using it, depending on what you're looking for. You want to make sure that the air pressure is coming out hard enough to be able to blast that into, these little tiny dots, or what we call atomization. So, I recommend maybe even possibly like, 40, 45 psi. I did some further tests with it, and I thought it was really good. At about 40, I was spraying at about 40, 45 psi. This test was done at about 35, 37 psi, but it still really worked well at that pressure as well. All right, there you have it. The TG Talon Gravity-Fed Airbrush by Paasche. Some of the pros and cons of this airbrush are, the con is, I don't really particularly care for Paasche's hoses. I remember that from way back. But they do give you an adapter, at least for the airbrush side of it. If you need an 1/8 inch on the other end of the hose, you're going to need an adapter for that. So I don't know if it's necessarily a con, it's just a personal preference. The positives about this airbrush, I mean, there were just many. It was real easy to change out the needle and tip sizes. At first I was concerned on how you can figure out which tips went with what needles and nozzles, but they're all clearly marked with an engraved stripe on the needle, the nozzle, and the needle nozzle. So there's really no confusion about what matches up with what, or any kind of special, markings you have to put on them so you can figure out what goes where. So that was really cool. I also like the design of the needle. So when you pull the needle out the back of the airbrush to clean it, the way the needle is designed, it doesn't pull any paint that I've saw back out on the needle. That's a big plus for me, because you know me, if any of you watch my videos, you know that I like to pull the needle out the front of the airbrush so I don't drag paint back through. So that is a very good pro for me. I thought that was really good, and that makes it easier to change out your needles and your nozzles, because in the middle of a paint change, you throw a little cleaner through there, you just take your needle out and pull it out to the back, put your nozzle on, put your cap on, and you're ready to go. So it literally took me less than, about 3 to 5 minutes between changes. So overall, the brush sprayed really well. Now the test with the fan cap, with the smaller needle sizes, I didn't expect it to perform really well, and it really didn't. But it performed very well with the 0.66, in which I really do believe that's what that was designed for. So it's a very versatile airbrush. It gives you everything from, it's basically like 4 airbrushes in one. It gives you everything from that very fine needle tip size to your medium to your 0.66, which is even bigger than my 0.5 that I have over there trigger
airbrush that has a fan cap on it, whereas this is a 0.66, so it moves a lot of paint fairly quickly. So for background coverages, it just makes really easy work of it. So with that, I hope you liked this video. I hope I covered everything in it. If you think I missed something, drop me a comment down below. If you like this type of content, you guys know the drill. Consider subscribing, hit that bell, check out those links. See you in the next video.